in Washington, I've worked with the various groups. And one thing that I've noticed is whether an individual calls himself libertarian, conservative, constitutionalist, or even progressive, that individuals can work together. And I suspect the people that are following what you're doing today might have a similar experience, and you may know what I'm talking about. That people come together even though we might not have precise understanding or agreements on all the issues, as much as the coming together I had found was due to individuals who wanted to be honest, wanted to know the truth of things, and they were driven more by finding truth than they were for promoting Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And therefore, I was able to talk to other people, but it was a narrow group because most people don't quite accept that. Do you have that sense as well?
Yeah, and it's just something that I have been thinking about recently and trying to describe this phenomena. You know, my political party that's running in the Australian elections next week, the WikiLeaks party, we are now already the fourth most popular party in Australia, only founded early this year. And we have a wide variety of people you would classically say are from the right and from the left within the party, and there are tensions about that. And I have to try and resolve these tensions and explain what is the commonality. And I think it's a very interesting phenomena that there has developed, I would say, an extreme centre in the establishment politics. So in in my language, the co-opted parts of the Republican Party, the co-opted parts of the Democratic Party, who are involved in self-promotion, networking, political dynasties, and that doing favours for mates and so on. And they're just working the system. They don't have any ideas really that they believe in. And then that extreme centre, which is really pushing forward aggressively in a particular direction to promote itself, has led to others feeling like that is not what they want to be involved in. And so there is now a magnetic force between what you would traditionally describe as segments of the right and segments of the left. And if we look at what is traditionally best about the left, we would say it's their will for justice, or their desire for justice, the decency of trying to look after people who unjust acts are committed to. And we can see that from a power perspective as well. They would say that injustice comes about as a result of inequalities in power. And if we look at a right libertarian perspective, we can say similarly that injustice or the lack of human virtue or growth comes about as a result of a lack of freedom and a lack of liberty. And that lack of freedom or lack of liberty at its essence is caused by an inequality in power. Your liberty can't be deprived from you unless someone else has got more power. And so there is actually a commonality between these 2 points of view. And I think one of the most important mechanisms which deprive people of liberty and deprive people of justice is asymmetry in information. So an asymmetry in power, an inequality in power, because one group knows what's going on and another group doesn't know what's going on or is being fed lies. And that is something I think that the right and the left, broadly speaking, the decent people who believe in something can agree on. That neither of them like to be told lies.
Well, let me ask you a few things specific about the campaign. You're running on a party label. Is it called WikiLeaks Party? Is that correct?
Yes, the WikiLeaks Party. We have started a few months ago. We have some thousands of members. We're running in 3 of the 5 states that are in Australia.
You don't have anybody in office. This is a brand new party. Is that correct? That's
correct. It's brand new, registered this year. The polling is very interesting. So even the Australian government's own polling outfit says that I have between 25 and 28% of the vote. That's across 4 different polls, including even a third polling outfit, Ray Morgan, of the voting intention. Now, that's not going to translate into the vote because the Australian voting system is quite complex in how the votes work, but that's an extremely interesting place to start from. And of course, I'm proud of that, but I think if we sort of pull back from my own personal interest, that's an interesting phenomenon that has occurred. It's 40% of the voting intention for people under the age of 30.
The work that you've been doing, I want to talk a little bit about that, the very important work that has drawn attention to many millions of people around the world. Can you describe rather briefly the motivation for you to do this? What is it? Is it generalized, just getting to the bottom of things and the truth, or are there some other motivations that you have, say in foreign policy, or how did you get so involved in this and get so much attention for this?
Yeah, well, I have a philosophical view that that every law, every regulation, every constitution, in fact, every decision that we take, even as individual human beings, comes about as a result of what we know and the communications that we have, and the sum total of the intellectual wealth of our civilizations, of our societies, are all based upon what we know. So we can only be as good as what we know. We can't be any better than what we know. Our decisions insofar as we try and make them about the world we live in have to be based on the world we live in. If they're based upon fantasies, we end up with things like the Iraq War. There was a decision about a world that we didn't live in, a world where Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which he did not, and the result is a catastrophe. So I look at this sort of long historical view about the development and sophistication and humanity of civilization being based on that. Then I would have to say, just personally, I don't like lies. In the Australian context, we would say, in fact, one of our party slogans is that it's time to make the bastards honest in Canberra, which is the Australian capital. And that's something that's appreciated by the Australian population. But they don't like being lied to either. And so I like a good fight. I like to know the truth. But in this bigger philosophical realm, I think the way for people to be free and the way for people to receive justice is for there to be more knowledge and more truth about how human institutions actually behave.
I wanted to bring up the subject of certain incidences that might prompt, governments to do certain things. Prior to the Iraq War, some of the neocons here in America wrote that a Pearl Harbor event in general would be a good idea because we could take advantage of it and we could bring all the people together. I was shocked that they were so blunt that it could be a positive to have a Pearl Harbor event. They didn't say let's create one. I'm not trying to say that, but they say if there's a Pearl Harbor event or if somebody else does it, yeah, let's take advantage of it. But haven't you touched on this subject of somebody looking for an incident with Syria that would justify, all the countries to come in and the United States government to come in, the British government to come in and do something in Syria? Was there something along that line that you had discovered?
That's right. I mean, part of the Stratfor release by WikiLeaks. Stratfor is a US intelligence contractor based in Texas, and we got hold of 5 million of their emails, and they do consulting work for many different government organizations and private organizations. And one of those emails from late 2011, December 2011, is a report back from one of their agents meeting with the US Air Force, representatives of the French military and British military, speaking about what the hopes and game plan was under various circumstances, essentially by the West or by the US and NATO, if you like. And that they really felt that what they needed was for there to be some humanitarian outrage in Syria, and that once they had that, that would legitimize going in with a big airstrike. And of course, they wanted to for other reasons. They were funding rebels. There's even talk about sending special operations forces in there. In fact, that they're already there on the ground advising people, assassination campaigns and so on. So the usual stuff, the usual way you subvert a government was being spoken about there very frankly. But most of all, for a bigger involvement, they needed some humanitarian outrage to hook it all onto. And we have seen that. I'm not suggesting that it was fabricated, although it is still possibly the case that the rebels may have done it. But for sure, it has now been taken advantage of. These countries never really gave a damn about Syrians before. They didn't care about Syrians. And if we look at the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, which is appalling, or the human rights situation in Bahrain, where a friend of mine who I interviewed has been held in a brainy prison for over 2 years for tweeting. They don't give a damn about that. They just want to take advantage of this situation in order to achieve what they see as their geopolitical ends in Syria.
One of the charges made against you and individuals like me who will defend openness in government and finding out what's going on is if you release this information, many innocent people are going to die. It's going to reveal secrets that people will suffer. And the way I understand it, you've gone to an extreme length to try to prevent this. And I would think that if any single person had been injured or died from the releases of information, they would be out there with that news. Is this just their propaganda for them to try to dissuade you from doing things? So just tell us exactly what you do to try to prevent any injury to anybody or anybody getting killed over the release of this information.
Well, it's an interesting question. It's an empirical point, right? Either this sort of publishing activity that we engage in gets people killed, or it doesn't, right? It's just a factual question. Well, we have 7 years of publishing history. Not a single person has physically come to harm. Now, that's not me saying that. That's the US government saying that. In fact, General Carr, the person who was responsible for looking into this issue in the Pentagon, said under oath just 2 months ago in the Bradley Manning trial that they could not find a single person that had come to harm as a result of our releases about the activities of the Pentagon or, in fact, any part of the US government. And no government official, not from the Pentagon, not from the State Department, not from other governments, alleges that we have caused even a single person to come to harm. So it's very interesting that you often hear that question spoken about, because it's completely false. Now, those people who've been involved in reporting on government activity over the years will tell you that is the line that is always trotted out, every single time. They've been doing it for 50 years at least. Every time that there's an embarrassing release of information revealing deception in government, that's the line to try and change the topic. They couldn't argue on the facts. Our facts are indisputable. We also have the world's best record for having never got it wrong. We have never released a document that has been misdescribed by us, released a false document saying it's true or something like that. So they couldn't argue on the grounds that what we were saying was false. So they have to try and, as we would say in Australia, play the man and not play the ball.
You've been working on this intensely, I'm sure, for quite a few years, at least for 7 years, on trying to get this information out. But I'm interested in what your reaction is. Does it get you angry? Do you get frustrated when you find out about things going on? How big a surprises have you found? Are you really shocked and surprised beyond what you anticipated? I actually am pretty surprised, even though I'm a cynic about all the government does. Sometimes I'm pretty shocked. What has your reaction been to what you have discovered over these years?
You know, sometimes I am shocked and surprised. I mean, I've been investigating what the National Security Agency and its allied agencies in other countries have been doing over 20 years. And I put out a book last year called Cypherpunks saying that, you know, we really have to watch this phenomenon because this is drifting into something that a National Security Agency scientist, William Binney, calls turnkey totalitarianism. So all the basic elements of a state, like we saw under the Stasi in East Germany, are being built up. It's a potentially a serious challenge to our democracy, and we've got to do something about it. But it turns out, and we saw this with the Edward Snowden revelations, that my most cynical interpretations about what was probably going on were correct. It did surprise me that, not that I hadn't thought that that sort of thing was possibly or probably going on, but that nearly every bad interpretation, nearly every negative interpretation was in fact occurring. The most educational experience that I've had with our publications is not one event or another. There's many very interesting individual events. For example, there's a military base there's a military base in the Indian Ocean, which is given to the United States by the UK, sort of loaned out. And there was a native people that have been there for 200 years. And the Brits structured environmental legislation to protect the fishing, protect the fish in the sea around that base. But it was all designed, in fact, to exclude the native people permanently and dump them in Mauritius and make a legal excuse to not have them come back, and also to manipulate the centre-left and the Green lobby and the environmental lobby into opposing the self-determination of those native peoples. So lots and lots of things like that. The biggest surprise, though, is the panorama, is the sort of that is done en masse and in so many places, and that it's systematized. I actually even think that in our release of the State Department cables, that no one, including within the State Department, had actually read them like the way that we did. That they were all dedicated to their little area of the world and their particular mission in a particular country, and they read the cables to do with that. But we and some others who were involved in the publications, and some very interested members of the general public, of course, read widely across the whole thing. So we could see what the general tendency was, and going on in many, many different countries. And that's the thing that is most concerning to me, that this isn't, what is happening to the world now is not some Henry Kissinger-esque figure making secret plots and plans about geopolitical strategy, and we do this here, and then we engage the Russians there, etc. That happens a little bit, and those people like to think that they're in charge. But it seems to me that what is actually going on is a pretty much out of control bureaucracy involving the state and big corporations. The National Security Agency now, 80% of its budget goes to Booz Allen Hamilton, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and so on. And it's not just a US phenomena. It's a global phenomenon. Companies like BAE, British Aerospace, they're in Sweden, they're in the United States. I liken it to a Mongol horde. There is some people trying to be in charge of it in some ways, but it's basically an unthinking, unreasoned process. And all the secrecy means that no one has proper oversight of what is going on. That to me is what is most concerning about it. This is not some bad people making bad decisions who understand what's going on. This is bad people, good people, all mixed up into a system where they're blind and blinkered because of the secrecy in an unthinking, marauding state corporate bureaucracy.
I understand that you're still doing some campaigning, even from your own location there.
Yeah, it's very interesting trying to run. We're running the campaign from here. You know, the media things I can do a bit like I'm doing with you. what's been much harder is to lead a political party from the other side of the world with a 9-hour time delay and having a lot of other things going on, a publishing organization, this massive Edward Snowden case. And that actually led to, indirectly, to a resignation of one of my running mates, only one, and 3 people on our national council. Because of that, you know, you need to sort of make as a leader, to make harmony amongst everyone else by collecting the differences yourself. So that has been quite challenging.